Becca, welcome to the Work and Worldview podcast. I'm so delighted that you could be here with us to share with our our viewers uh, just some of the information I've been able to learn from you as we've spoken in the past about just aging, fitness. You're a wealth of knowledge. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So getting started, where did you come from? What was your family
hmm
like? What were the values in the home that you were raised in?
hmm I was a very close-knit family. I had a mom and a dad and three siblings. I was the oldest of four kids.
Okay.
And my mom was more like the perfectionist, stay-at-home mom, and she valued education and hard work. She was definitely a hard worker. And my dad was very much a self-taught man. She was very creative. He was a little bit more laid back than my mom, though, as far as perfectionism and things like that. And we were in a Christian home. We started going to church when we moved to West Virginia. And it was just this old country church, still very family oriented, family values. We focused on grace and the gospel. And that is also where my dad became a Christian as well. So he was a very important leader in a family that highly influenced me and who I am today.
Awesome. How old were you when you moved to West Virginia?
I was about 7 years old. And
Okay.
actually, my youngest sibling had not been born yet. So my mom was pregnant with her during this whole move.
Mhm.
And it was sort of like a culture shock too, because we came from New Jersey, flat, really close to the ocean, highly influenced by Philadelphia, to West Virginia. We lived in a valley. There are mountains, and we didn't know anybody there. So we had to kind of start from scratch, just building up the people in the community, and that it just took a little bit.
Yeah, sure. It always does, right? A move is certainly that way. And then, as you grew and started moving toward, your sort of career direction, but leading into that, were there any early influences that kind of shaped you or started, kind of turning over rocks in the direction you ended up going?
We're always kind of like a lot of times we were focused on natural talent and being gifted or like blessed with certain talents and skills. And even though we were also kind of focused on education and learning and growth, we still kind of had this belief that people were born with natural talents. Some people are more blessed than us, and people are luckier than us. And it wasn't really until college that a page turned and I became a little bit more disillusioned with talent.
Hmm.
Talent got me through high school, I guess. But when I was in college, I put on a lot of weight and I became like this kind of learned helplessness
Hmm.
with this weight gain and having believed that talent was the way to go, that you're just born a certain way and this is how you have to live, or this is how you live and how you
Hmm.
can live. And there's always like a little bit of jealousy and resentment with people who are more fit than I am. But I didn't see the background behind how they got there. And maybe they were raised in a more athletic home, but I learned that and I decided to take ownership, and that is another value that I had, that it does come from my mom because she's always been a hard worker. She's always been digging her heels in and working in the home, but there was helplessness in certain aspects of her life, like health. She came from an abusive home, and that is one of the reasons why she was so perfectionist
Hmm.
too, and especially appearances were important. But as I grew up, digging deeper and trying to realize that I actually have a certain amount of control over my body, my physiology, even my brain, and how I
Hmm.
think.
Hmm.
So that has improved my life greatly. just turning over that leaf. And I
Mm.
do have to say, I'm going to give kudos to my mom because she had lost like over 200 pounds.
Wow.
And just by watching what she eats, and I don't want to say just by, because it's a big deal changing your food
Mhm.
habits,
Mhm.
but she changed her food habits and she started walking more. And, you know, everyone has a certain amount of body fat, and body fat is an acceptable part of your body, and it actually does have health benefits.
Mm.
But obesity and being overweight can also be associated with chronic conditions. There are over 20 chronic conditions associated with being overweight. And
Wow.
I became overweight in college myself, and I had this kind of helplessness where, like, well, some people are just lucky, it's my genetics, I'm heavy because of my genetics, I can't help it. But really, I was having like 2 breakfasts a day. Like, I would basically have breakfast and then I would have like a donut mid-morning.
Mhm.
So it was things like that.
Yeah.
Then that page turned and I realized my autonomy. We all have a certain amount of autonomy, and we have more autonomy when we realize that we have autonomy. So that's like the opposite of learned helplessness right there.
Right. Right. So were you studying like physiology and so like was your mind leading your body as you were like what was your major and how did was there an interplay there?
Oh, that's a really good question. My major is education.
Okay.
So for me, anything when it comes to like learning a new skill, it starts in your brain first, almost always. Even if it's your physical body that you want to change, you want to lose weight, you want to build muscle.
Mhm.
And I became a teacher, so my background is in education, and I had several other experiences leading to adult education and studying neuroplasticity, because when
Okay.
actually you become an adult, you can still learn. You can still retrain your brain to think in certain ways that don't make you stuck.
Why don't you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, like I said, sometimes our background leads us to learned helplessness. Our attitudes are influenced by our beliefs and our values. So if we believe that she's just talented or she just has the right genetics, she's lucky, there is an element of truth to having genetics that influence your health outcomes. But when we think about how we are retraining our mind, we have to kind of relearn, and everyone tells themselves a story. So we need to start saying, I can learn this, I can change this. And you're kind of placing yourself in another position to where, okay, even though I don't even know what I'm doing, I'm going to try to figure this out. And I feel like the toughest part is consistency after that, because we do fall back into our old patterns because it's easier. It's
Mhm.
like wearing ruts in the ground if
Mhm.
you're like pulling a cart or a wheelbarrow. So, I live in the country, so we did some gardening and stuff. And so it got easier to pull that wheelbarrow to the garden when there were ruts to kind of push it through, but
Mhm.
to then push it out of the rut and push it towards the garden, there was a lot more resistance there. So we're kind of, when it comes to neuroplasticity and retraining our brains, we're putting new ruts in the soil, so to speak.
Gotcha. Excellent. Excellent imagery. I appreciate that. So going forward, you had this background in education. You recognize that neuroplasticity has a role, like you can change, and there's importance in choosing to change and sticking to it, right? Um, so tell me a little bit about like you're living out those changes. So you're in college, you're overweight. What did the way out for you look like from that situation?
Learning. So I first off had to figure out, well, how do you lose weight? And I remember asking my aunt, who she had been dieting and losing weight. She was a registered nurse. And I'm like, "What did you do?" And she just said, "I ate less and I moved more." I'm like, "Okay, how much less?" I really didn't know how much I was eating,
Mhm.
but I kind of picked a number after doing some research. I picked 1,500 calories a day. I don't know if it's scientifically backed, but they do say that the average person consumes around 2,000 or 2,200 calories is like a healthy amount for the average person. That number's been around for a while, but maintenance calories is one of those things that I now help my clients figure that out. It's going to be so different for everybody.
Mhm.
1,500 calories was what I picked at the time, and I was about 210 pounds, and I'm 5'3".
Mhm.
So it was a lot for a little person
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
have.
Mhm.
But yeah, 1,500 calories, and I read nutrition labels. I started measuring. I had to research. This was before I had a whole lot of internet also.
Mhm.
So
Sure.
now we have so many tools, we have apps, we have so many um, tools at our disposal to help us to accomplish this. But I actually had to I had a piece of paper, I listed out my foods, I did my addition, subtraction, division, and I figured everything out. I did a lot of measuring, and that was for 3 months.
Okay.
And I lost a lot of weight.
Wow.
And I had managed to keep it off for several years until my first child, which under those conditions, you are supposed to gain weight.
Sure. Yeah, I imagine so.
Yeah.
Great. So you came out of it through just diligence, hard work, studying labels, etc. Right?
hmm
When did the formal education with this? Obviously, you're skilled far beyond those things today, right? And we're going to get into some more of that. But where did the formal education on these topics come along?
Yeah, I mean, you just acquire so much over time. So
Hmm.
weight loss was definitely a thing.
Hmm.
And then I started running and I was really interested in cardio and endurance training. Um, I that took a pause when I found out I had cancer. So
Mm.
I had stage 3 classical Hodgkin's lymphoma,
Wow.
and I used that as a way I try to remember that circumstance because it is important for me to kind of remember how weak I felt in the moment, how vulnerable. I know what it feels like to be weak,
Hmm.
and it just makes me feel so much more gratitude for the
Mm.
strength that I have now.
Hmm.
But after pulling through, this was several months of treatment, radiation, chemotherapy. I had to take a drug to increase my white blood cell count
Hmm.
so that I wouldn't get sick. And at this time, I basically had to eat whatever didn't make me sick.
Wow.
It was
Wow.
like cold cereal. I had to eat foods that were cooked, preferably because of my low white blood cell count. I had a higher risk of infections and sepsis. So But fortunately, I pulled out of that. It was May, my hair started growing back. I could do more activities. I did some hiking, camping, and in the fall, I joined Team in Training. Team in Training is an organization that is like a combination of endurance type um, hobbies, competitions, not really competitions, but races. Like there's triathlons and they train you for running. And I decided to train for a half marathon. It was the longest distance that I've ever run and never really thought I was a runner. It was really hard to become a runner for me, especially when I was obese and trying to get into that way back, before the cancer. But getting back into running and joining this team and also fundraising for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And there were coaches and people you could talk to. And I'm like, oh, I really want to do that because I feel like content is so important when it comes to education. You want to get the content right, the knowledge portion. I liked literature, I liked science, the parts of the animal cell, everything, just study all the words in the vocabulary. But when it comes to actually learning and teaching, it's really more about human psychology than it is about the content. You can't just present content and expect people to know it.
Mhm,
But I really like the dynamics of working with the coaches and working with other adult learners who were interested in these topics.
mhm.
And I became certified from International Sports Sciences Association because I wanted to be a coach, and I went back to school for learning design.
So, can you just shed a little light on that for people who maybe aren't aware, don't have that training? What's the difference between what we learn in grade school or maybe even high school and how adults learn? What are some of the differences just for if you could spell that out a
Yeah.
little?
I think that kids, obviously, their brains are developing at the same time that they are learning. And there are specific sections of the brain that are developing. Like the prefrontal cortex isn't even fully developed until you're like in your mid-20s,
Mhm,
and there's emotions kind of play a role more, and especially in the teenage brain. But when you become an adult, your brain is just shaped differently. For one thing, there's more ruts from the habits that you've made, from the knowledge that you've memorized
mhm,
and experiences that you've had. There, you think more with the front part of your brain as opposed to the amygdala. So
mhm.
maybe you make fewer emotional decisions and you're more logical. So adults need education that is more tailored to them and more specific to what they need and want to do.
Okay.
So kids are kind of given like more of a broader education and more well-rounded so that they can kind of maybe discover, and they're more able to do that because they have more time and they have more flexibility, whereas adults have a little bit less of that.
A little more utility to adults learning, right? There's
Right.
typically more purpose behind, like, I need to learn this for work, or I need to learn this because I'm facing a health challenge, or right? Okay, so you went forward. Like, when did all of this turn into business? And then tell me about that business.
I do own my own business. I call myself a strength and conditioning coach, and I create educational media and resources for people. I realized how important it is for this information to be more accessible to people, that it's not just genetics, it's not just talent. You can do things at home. You can have a fitness plan tailored to your needs and your desires for whatever kind of strength, whatever goal you are having. And I like to teach group classes. So I've been going to the library and I am teaching this class that I call accessible strength, but the library advertised it as simple strength. And it that totally sums up what this class is. It is basically teaches the basics. And so I work with beginners
Mhm,
and I do work with individuals as well to give them a more focused training plan. But this class that I worked with was such a blessing. And they were my first class. I piloted accessible strength. I had a variety of people in there. One of them had cerebral palsy,
wow,
and someone also had early stages of Parkinson's. They were different ages, different abilities. I believe the youngest person there was like in her early 30s. And
okay.
she was also there with two other family members, and they were working together on these exercises that I was showing them. So it was great. And the oldest one there probably was close to 70.
Oh, is it calibrated for a particular age range?
This class was intended to target older adults.
Okay,
I was glad the younger adults were there,
mhm,
but primarily it was beginners. And I
okay.
really wanted to target people who didn't think that they could actually gain muscle. So I had to teach them that they could exercise and what exercises were going to be beneficial to them.
And then So there's a value there in gaining muscle that maybe you know about, but maybe not everyone listening does. So why don't you expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, so you definitely want to work on your resistance training in your muscle. Probably, if you haven't started yet, you need to start right now because you actually lose muscle over time. You lose a percentage of your muscle mass basically when you turn 30. And it's a percentage that you lose every year, which means you're losing strength. You're losing power. Power is the adaptation in your body that allows you to jump certain distances or punch something. Not that you want to be punching anything, but punch power is important. So muscle strength, that is super important and it does decrease over time. So if you start training now, you can fight that. Muscle health is also highly influential in your weight management. So it's muscle is a very metabolically demanding tissue and it needs the energy. Like it needs the energy from your food and even your fat cells to be able to do anything. So you need your muscle. It's very helpful for weight management, metabolic function. Having muscle is also just good for your mental health. I think it just allows us to feel a level of independence and confidence, but it also helps improve our circulatory system and our mood. And there are many other like mechanisms in there that influence our cognition and our mood that come from our muscle. So I don't know all of those in great detail, but there is some evidence that it influences those things as well.
So inaccessible strength or simple strength, whichever title we're going to go with, how do you address those things?
So it was an 8-week class and I was teaching the basics. I wanted them to know, one, the importance of muscle, but I mainly wanted to teach them the fundamentals of growing muscle. So we focused on compound movements, which a compound weightlifting movement involves more than one muscle group, more than one joint usually is moving. Like, say, for example, a shoulder press will move your elbows and your shoulders. So that is a great compound movement that will improve your ability to reach, pull things off a shelf. So I would give examples as well of activities that require those muscle groups for that strength. And they're very thankful for that. And so we focused on compound movements. We also focused on what it feels like to have an intense weightlifting session because intensity is what gonna stimulate your muscles to make those changes. If you're just doing light weights, your muscles really don't have a reason to grow. So if you're
Okay.
using heavier weights, then your muscles are like, "Wait a minute, okay, we need to build more so that
Hmm.
we can lift more." And, that is a signal. So we worked with different sized weights and I pushed them. So I was there to make sure that they were working hard. And I also had to remember that these people were beginners. So what is working hard for them is be different from working hard for me. So, but I really needed to see what their failure looked like once they learned the form of the exercise so they wouldn't get injured, then I was able to kind of push them a little bit more to see where that line was before they would fail the exercise. And by failing just means they couldn't get that rep up.
Hmm.
The form wasn't very good, but I was there to watch them. So, and they also did more simpler exercises too, because I was working with a group of people and I couldn't be with every single person at the same time.
Hmm.
We also worked on other challenges because falls are a very serious event in a person's life, especially when they're like 55 and older. And when you fall, it is a lot harder to recover. People often will break a bone, um, maybe even some of the muscle tissue if they land on their arm. So what I did was I gave them certain balancing activities to try. And that does require a certain amount of muscle strength. So your muscle strength in your back, in your legs, in your core, which is your abdominals as well. that all does influence your balance. And I gave them challenging exercises for that. They stood on a mat and they're like, wow, this is a little unstable. And they were trying to challenge themselves. I'm like, if you challenge yourself a little bit every day in an environment that allows you that to be safe, then you can develop these adaptations even at 55 and beyond.
Mhm.
So we work with that, and we also work with proprioception. And one particular student found proprioception very important to her because she had cerebral palsy. And she had very specific goals in mind. And these goals were activities of daily life. Okay. Our activities of daily life are affected by our muscle mass and our strength. And that's why I tell people when you start 30, if you haven't started lifting, lift right now. But
Mm.
she wants to be able to walk from her house to the bus stop. She wants to be able to step over cracks in the road. She wants to be able to lift up her walker. Um, and there are very specific things that she wanted to be able to do and continue to do. So she did reverse lunges. We did that because when you're moving your leg behind you, you can't see that unless you're looking at it. Proprioception is where your body is in space and how you can move it in space. And so we practiced reverse lunges, and all of us did this as well. But that was one of the challenges in the 8-week class that we discussed. So there were plenty of examples of exercises. We revisited several exercises, but I definitely want to say that the intensity of the exercise is important and progressively overloading your weight. So you want to advance. You want to get heavier weights and you can always deload, you can make it lighter and that you can work with a coach to discover this. You can do your own research and just kind of experiment a little bit. But another thing is we talked about lifting safely for our backs. These people had a certain level of fragility that if they did fall, it would be detrimental to them. And when you're a coach, you do have to take that into an account. And I think
Sure.
that also people are less fragile than they think they are too.
Rebecca, on coaching for just a moment, you shared with me a little bit of a framework about coaching, what a coach brings to the table. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
So the coach needs to engage with the audience. So, and of course, that starts in a broader sense, like the importance of muscle building, what your muscles can do for you, what they do for you, and you don't realize it. So, engagement, and then making the exercises entertaining, social, applicable to their lives, and then providing feedback. So, feedback is also important because you're learning what intensities you can handle in an exercise when the client is speaking with the coach. You have this back and forth of, how do you feel? How were you in the last week? Oh, you missed a workout. What was that like? What happened? You injured yourself in a workout, say you did at home or whatever, you have an ache or a pain, you have a cold, what can we do? So there's definitely a lot of that feedback that goes really back and forth. But feedback is also important for form checks, especially for doing some really heavy lifting like deadlifts or hip hinges, which are really good for the hamstrings and glutes. But if you're not careful, you can hurt your lower back.
Hmm.
So form checks are also very important. And then, of course, programming. A program that you give a client is really a living document.
Hmm.
I usually have like a general idea of what a full, 3-month, 6-month program should look like for this client to reach their goals.
Hmm.
But changes happen over time. You need to make adjustments, again, with the feedback you're discussing. So programming is also really important, but it does need to be flexible and, the background education. that I do behind the scenes to educate myself on new science and what has been studied, especially there's more emerging science on female health and athleticism. So there's always something new to learn.
Mhm,
So I'm keeping myself updated as well. And that's another reason why programming those documents are living documents.
mhm, mhm. What caused you to focus on older adults?
And partly this was due to my dad's declining health and my mom's health, which she gained back. Like she, like I said earlier, obesity is linked to over 20 different chronic conditions. And my mom, when she lost weight from walking and eating healthier, she no longer has sleep apnea. She has so much more energy. So just seeing the results
Mhm,
really is highly influential. Now, my father, he had an autoimmune disease and he has since passed away from sepsis, but he had other underlying health issues where his strength was declining. And my brother had to help him in his final days ambulate. He couldn't toilet on his own. And, you know, I know I said earlier when we talked about autonomy and choosing and doing the workouts. But then you also have what's given to you in life, genetics, health conditions, and those things are not your fault. I mean, you can mitigate the risks that maybe some of your genetics bring to you,
mhm,
or or conditions that you have.
mhm,
You can't always control those, but it has, I feel now more so that I have more balance, that it's not all me and my autonomy and my independence. There is a balance, there's a certain humility that you need to have as well.
For people out there who may be listening or watching, what are some of the triggers? Like for example, you said if you're not weightlifting, you should be like kind of like you should have started yesterday, right? And that's great. But what are some indicators that really you're in a place where you need to take this seriously? Or perhaps like what are some things you see when you just see people out in public that kind of if that person had the awareness you wish they had, they would be taking actions. What are some of those sort of symptoms that there's, if you to move in this direction toward yeah, improving?
Yeah. Um, and it's also hard because these changes can be so gradual, they feel so gradual. But how are you getting in and out of a chair?
Mhm,
Okay, do you have to lean on something? Do you have to pull yourself up? How are you getting in and out of a chair or off the toilet? Or, again, that's such like a personal thing, but people they need that independence. So that is a strong indicator. I even saw a woman, she's probably as young as like 35, struggling to get out of an office chair. She had to lean on the table and push up to get out of an office chair. So pay attention to that. Um, Pay attention to how you feel when you climb stairs. It can be improved. It's not just the stairs' fault, or we shouldn't have stairs in this house, or, I'm just going to take the elevator. That's an indicator. You can actually improve the quality um, that of being able to climb stairs, and that is leg strength, right? Um, Being able to reach an object off a high shelf above your head and bring it down to the counter. Paying attention to that. How does that feel heavy? Where do you feel that? Do you feel that in the center of your body? Do you feel that in your arms and in your back? Does it hurt your neck? Those things. When you're walking your dog, do you just not want to walk your dog anymore because he or she pulls on the leash and drags you along and you feel like you just can't keep up, that you might fall? I do notice that people of a certain age start to have like a natural fear of falling.
mhm,
And I'm not exactly sure how that develops, but they have this lack of stability that they feel. Now that's a little bit later. You can still work on that and work on your strength when you get to that point.
mhm.
But you want to be really careful.
What's at work in that? Is that proprioception as well, or is it some other, like, what's the mechanism that causes people to suddenly become very fearful about falling?
I think part of it is just a psychological attitude, something in your brain, an attitude that you have,
Mhm,
but it could also be a physical feeling of weakness or just a lack of firmness on the ground, a lack of traction
mm,
for some reason. I think some of it's mental, but I don't think it's proprioception. I think it's strength needed.
interesting. Fascinating stuff, Rebecca. Always. Um, so you have this company. How do you position your company? So you mentioned an offering, this pilot class that you ran. What are you doing now? Like, that was, I think you completed that recently, last month or 2, right?
I have like three basic offerings. I offer personalized training. This is one-on-one, individualized. You sign on for 3 months, and that's what I'm doing with this younger individual. And I can devote the time to just making your program the way you need it to be. I also have subscriptions. So subscriptions are access to my educational resources that I create. Videos, there's also Q&As, and I also have classes that will pop up where you're invited to these classes that I
Okay.
put on. And I also have weight loss coaching, and it's more intense and it's also one on one, and it requires weekly meetings, a deep dive. And so you kind of need a bit more. There's a little bit more human psychology when it comes to that than it does, say, strength and conditioning to a degree, because food just means so much to us. So free weights, I love free weights. They're versatile and you can work every muscle group with those. I am also on Eastern time. I don't know if that's helpful for some people to know, but I am on Eastern time.
Okay. What values have you found most productive and in what ways?
Definitely responsibility, the responsibility you have. To me, I think inclusivity and accessibility is also important. That is a value that I have. Training weights are not just for elite athletes. They're not for people who want to look good on the beach. Yes, they are for those people too. But I want strength training and strength to be more accessible. I want people to say, yes, I can do this. There's something out there for me. To include them, include people from different backgrounds, and then, provide this education and resources to those people.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks, Becca. This thing has been very, very helpful. You definitely shared more of your story than I knew before. I think hearing about the weight loss, hearing about the cancer and the things that you've overcome and the goals that you set for yourself, like the half marathon, it's just remarkable. It's a remarkable story of where discipline can take you, where just vision can take you, and obviously living out these values that you have. Very, very powerful, powerful story. So thank you so much.
Thank you.